Prabhupada Lilamrta, the biography in 6 volumes of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. His life, his preaching, his teaching, his example, his pastimes. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Great, great, great devotee of Krishna. This is chapter 10. Prabhupada is in Vrindavan. He's preparing to come to the U.S. And in 1959, he took sannyas. Keshava Maharaj gave the initiation, and Narayan Maharaj performed the actual ritual, ceremony, Narayan Maharaj. So Keshava Maharaj and Prabhupada were god brothers, and Narayan Maharaj is a disciple of Keshava Maharaj. So he's like a nephew, like Prabhupada's nephew. Way to look at it. All right, Prabhupada is now taking sannyas. Chapter 10. This momentous hour of need. And it is a long chapter. There's a little paragraph in italics here before the biographer continues. And it's a quote from the Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Volume 1. It's probably the purport. It's purport. Our capacity of presenting the matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail. And there may be so many literary discrepancies in spite of our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that with our faults, all our faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of the society will still accept this on account of its being an honest attempt to glorify the Almighty Great, so much now badly needed. So there's a verse in the Bhagavatam, and such literature, even though imperfectly composed, is still honored, sung, and treasured. It just sounds like purport to something like that. Bhaktivedanta Swami, accompanied by some of the Keshavaji Mat's devotees, made a short preaching tour of Agra, Kanpur, Jhansi, and Delhi. But he was soon back in his own place at the Vamsi Gopalaji temple. No one called him Abhay Babu any longer. Even amongst friends, it was Swamiji or Maharaj, and people often addressed him as Swami Bhaktivedantaji, Swami Maharaj, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. People readily recognized him as a sadhu and offered respect. Excuse me. People readily recognized him as a sadhu and offered respect. Yet his basic problems remained. He wanted to write in print, but he had no money. He wanted to broadcast the message of Godhead, but few were willing to listen. Such things hadn't been changed by his becoming a Swami. When a librarian advised Bhaktivedanta Swami to write books, they were permanent, whereas newspapers were read once and thrown away, he took it that his spiritual master was speaking through this person. Then an Indian army officer who liked Back to Godhead suggested the same thing. Bhaktivedanta Swami took it as a revelation from his spiritual master. As a dependent servant constantly meditating on the desires of his transcendental master and seeking his guidance, Bhaktivedanta Swami felt his spiritual master's reciprocal blessings and personal presence. More and more he was feeling confidential contact with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and now he was feeling an inspiration to write books. So this is very nicely written by a disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Satsvarupa Maharaj. Done a very wonderful job of writing about Prabhupada's life and activities. He considered Srimad Bhagavatam because it was the most important and authoritative Vaishnava scripture. Although Bhagavad Gita was the essence of all Vedic knowledge, presented in a brief ABC fashion, Srimad Bhagavatam was elaborate, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Thakur Bhaktivinoda had both written Bengali commentaries on the Bhagavatam. In fact, most of the great Vaishnava Acharyas of the past had commented on Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya himself had recommended Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless Vedic literature. An English translation and commentary for this book could one day change the hearts of the entire world, and if he could publish even a few books, his preaching would be enhanced. He could go abroad with confidence and not appear empty-handed. Krishna. Allergies. Krishna. One day, Gaurachand Goswami, proprietor of the Radha Damodar temple, approached Bhaktivedanta Swami, inviting him to come live at the Radha Damodar temple, being the eternal home of Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami. It would be more suitable for his writing and translating. Bhaktivedanta Swami was interested. He had never stopped his regular visits there, and he always felt inspired in the presence of the Samadhi tombs of the great leaders of Lord Chaitanya's movement, Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami. But when he went to look at the two available rooms, he found them in poor repair. They had not been maintained or lived in for many years. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, however, Bhaktivedanta Swami agreed to take the rooms at 5 rupees per month. He estimated that for a little more than 500 rupees, he could have electricity installed and extensive repairs made, and when it was finished, he could move in. Bhaktivedanta Swami saw the invitation as auspicious, and living there would complement his new project of presenting Srimad Bhagavatam in English. Of all Vrindavan temples, Radha Damodar had the largest collection of original writings by the 6 Goswamis and their followers. More than 2,000 separate manuscripts, many of them 300, some even 400 years old. More than 2,000 separate manuscripts. Bhaktivedanta Swami looked forward to residing there someday and serving in the company of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami. For now, he would remain at the Vamsi Gopalaji temple, and with whatever money he could collect, he could gradually repair the rooms. It was an important maxim of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that a preacher should go to the cities and not remain in seclusion of a holy place. So in that spirit, Bhaktivedanta Swami continued commuting to Delhi, even though to him it was a hell, and even though he had no fixed residence there. Often he was taken in by businessmen who felt obliged on the basis of Indian culture. A good man, if he wanted to be favored by God, should accommodate the sadhus and give them meals and a place to stay. But the vision of such pious men was a sentimental Hinduism, and their receptions were artificial. They could not really appreciate Bhaktivedanta Swami's work, and Bhaktivedanta Swami was not of a mind to impose himself upon such hosts. Then he spoke with Mr. Hitsaran Sharma, manager of the Radha Press. In the past, Mr. Sharma had printed flyers and stationery for the League of Devotees, and Bhaktivedanta Swami had stayed in Mr. Sharma's house on occasion. Mr. Sharma introduced Bhaktivedanta Swami to Pandit Sri Krishna Sharma, a caste Brahmin and active religionist, secretary to the century-old Delhi Religious Society, Sri Naval Prem Sab. Out of sympathy for Bhaktivedanta Swami's literary labors, Krishna Pandit gave him a room in his Radha Krishna temple in the Chipawada neighborhood of Old Delhi. Now, Bhaktivedanta Swami would have a permanent office in Delhi. The train for Mathura would arrive at the Old Delhi station near Chandni Chowk, the broad avenue down which poured a river of workday traffic, rickshaws, bicycle riders, sometimes a dozen abreast, autos in lesser numbers, and men running on foot, pulling heavy carts, and beasts of burden, donkeys, oxen, an occasional camel or elephant, carrying heavy loads and being driven by men with whips in their hands. From the intensely busy Chandni Chowk, Bhaktivedanta Swami would take the short walk to Chipawada, past the Red Fort, keeping the Gauri Shankara temple on his left, then proceeding along a side street past the large, imposing Jam Mosque. Near Chipawada, the streets would become narrow. Chipawada had been a Muslim neighborhood until the Indian-Pakistan partition in 1947, when thousands of Punjabi Hindus had settled there. Chipawada was part of a mixed Hindu-Muslim neighborhood, so crowded with people that cars were not allowed to enter the streets. Only ox carts and rickshaws could penetrate the narrow, crowded lanes, and in some areas the lanes were planted with iron posts to keep rickshaws out. Even a bicycle rider would create havoc amongst the densely packed crowds of shoppers and workers who moved along the streets and lanes. Side streets led to other side streets, lanes so narrow that the second-floor balconies on opposite sides of the street were only inches apart, practically forming a roof over the street, so that the pedestrian could glimpse only the narrowest patch of sky. Private yards, shops, and alleys became almost indistinguishable from the public thoroughfares. Although most shops bore signs in Hindi with subheadings in English, some bore the curvy scripts of Arabic, and women dressed in black with veiled faces were a common sight. In the heart of this intense city life was the narrow entrance of Krishna Pandit's Radha Krishna temple with a plaque of the demigod Ganesh and a row of nesting pigeons just above its simple arched door. Calcutta is the largest city in the world. London's up there, it's pretty large, and New York. But Calcutta takes the cake. Calcutta is the most populated city in the world, Calcutta. The temple, with its resident families, retained some of the tenement atmosphere of the neighborhood. Although the temple was dark, the Radha Krishna deities on the altar were well illuminated. Radharani was the color of cream, and Krishna was black marble and stood about 2 feet tall. He was decorated with dots of fresh sandalwood pulp and a mask of yellow sandalwood on his face. Both deities were dressed in silk garments. On the second floor, just above the deity room, was a guest room, Bhaktivedanta Swami's room. Its cement walls and floor were completely bare. Protruding up from the floor was a 3-foot-high concrete pyramid with a spire, indicating that the deities were directly beneath. You can't walk on top of the deities, so there would be a pyramidal kind of spire over where the deities were. I'm wondering if there's a picture of that. Yeah, this is Prabhupada's room in New Delhi at the Radha Krishna temple in Chipawada that he used as an office while he was writing and printing those first volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a picture down here, right here. There's like a little pyramid. It's over where the deities are. And that was Prabhupada's room in that very busy part of Calcutta. Bhaktivedanta Swami soon found that his room was not secluded, but was side by side with other residential rooms. Outside the door, a metal grating smaller than in the Vamsi Gopalaji temple and Kesabaji Math revealed the small temple courtyard below. From the roof, hardly a single tree could be seen. The view was of tenement rooftops, so tightly crowded together that it seemed one could walk from one roof to roof all the way to the colossal Jama Mosque. The mosque's 3 large domes, surrounded by taller minarets, rose high above the ordinary buildings, attracting flocks of pigeons which perched upon the domes or flew in wheeling patterns in the sky. Krishna Pandit, dressed in a black, lightweight cotton coat, the kind made internationally recognizable by Pandit Nehru, and he had the Nehru hat also. He spoke good English and was garrulous. He was well known and respected within the neighborhood. He saw Bhaktivedanta Swami as God sent, a sadhu for him to take care of, and thus prove once again the piety of Hindu culture. He found his new guest likable, a simple, gentle, gracious, and accomplished Vaishnav scholar. Krishna Pandit said he understood the importance of Bhaktivedanta Swami's Sanatana Dharma mission and his need for a Delhi office, and he vowed to supply his guest with whatever he required. Although Bhaktivedanta Swami was reluctant to ask for anything for himself, Krishna Pandit brought in a sitting mat and a low table, placing them before the pyramid. He also brought a mattress. He showed Bhaktivedanta Swami how to operate the room's single light, a bulb and metal shade that hung from a cord and could be raised or lowered by hand. He brought a picture of Radha and Krishna that had been given to his guru by the Maharaj of Jaipur, and he set it within a niche in the wall, relishing that Bhaktivedanta Swami could gaze upon it with the eyes of a true devotee. Bhaktivedanta Swami had wanted a secure place for writing books before going to the West, and Lord Krishna had provided it. Now, he could work either in Vrindavan or in Delhi. Almost immediately, he began Back to Godhead again, serializing book excerpts from his previous manuscripts, while at the same time beginning Srimad Bhagavatam. When Krishna Pandit learned of his guest's lone struggles to produce Back to Godhead, he volunteered to help him with some of the business aspects of the publication. Bhaktivedanta Swami, indeed, gratified by Krishna Pandit's sincere help and appreciation, he gave him an addition to his name, Hari Bhaktanudas. So Krishna Pandit Haribhaktanudas, one who serves the Lord's devotee. After 6 months in Chipawada, Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote an appreciation in the temple's guest book. This is what he wrote in the guest book. I am pleased to write herein that I have come to Delhi from my headquarters, 1/859 Keshigat, Vrindavan, Uttar Pradesh, purely on spiritual mission to propagate the cult of devotional service of the Lord. And I am more pleased to mention herewith that Sriman Shri Krishna Sharma Haribhaktanudas has provided me a suitable room for my literary activities. I'm publishing an English fortnightly magazine of the name Back to Godhead from this place, and the Nawal Prem Shab, of which Sri Krishnadas is the honorary secretary, is arranging for my daily lectures on Srimad Bhagavatam. Late Pandit Jyoti Prasad Sharma, father of Sri Krishnadas, was also known to me, and during his lifetime, whenever I used to come to Delhi, late Pandit Jyoti Prasadji would provide me with residential place. His good son is also following in the footsteps of his noble father, and as secretary of the Nawal Prem Shab, he is doing good service in propagating Ram Nam all over the city. In neat English script, Bhaktivedanta went on to write that, in his opinions, temples should be used solely for educating the public in spiritual values, and that it was his personal mission to organize temples for that service. So, more Prabhupada writing, temples are not meant for ordinary householders, engaged simply in the matters of animal propensities. Those who are actually engaged in the service of the Lord deity, the predominator of the temple, can only be allowed to remain in the temple, otherwise not. So the biographer continues, trying to compose Srimad Bhagavatam at Chipawada while surrounded by sometimes noisy families with their non-devotional domestic habits had impressed upon him the importance of not using a temple as an apartment house. So his room, there were several rooms there, and his room was adjoining some other rooms, and there were families living in there that they were just living there. Non-devotional domestic habits. And so Prabhupada became determined. The temples are only for those actually engaged in serving the deity, the predominator of the temple, and not otherwise. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada.